The Nintendo DS is without a doubt one of Nintendo's most well-known portable consoles, with its most notable feature being its double screen, which allows for more versatility when it comes to gameplay. It also introduced a touchscreen as a core mechanic to many of its titles. The first time I owned a DS was back in 2010, and back then my go-to game, and the one I consider my favorite DS game to this day, was Mario Kart DS. That game was, in fact, the reason why I wanted a DS in the first place as a kid back when it was already fresh out of the oven. And when you think of the Nintendo DS, you obviously think of games such as the already mentioned Mario Kart DS, as well as other titles such as other Mario games, the Pokemon Gen 4 and 5 games as well as the Gen 2 remakes, Zelda Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, Animal Crossing Wild World, Power Touch, and you might even think of some underrated gems like Rhythm Heaven and Ghost Trick, just to name a couple. All of these are amazing games for sure, but did you know there's games such as The Sims 3 and Plants vs Zombies that got DS ports? In this video, I want to talk about the interesting and often overlooked topic of DS ports that you may have had no idea existed. So let's get right into it. The Sims is arguably the most popular life simulation game of all time, with the latest entry in the series, The Sims 4, being not only a really well-polished experience when it comes to its essence, but also a free-to-play title that literally anyone could play. And every game in the series has its own unique characteristics and charm, with some games being centered around topics like pets and being a castaway, but some of them also having a full storyline to go along with the overall simulation gameplay. Although, if you had to ask me, I would say that the Sims games I enjoy the most are the ones that don't really follow a set storyline and go straight into the development of our sim the way we want them to be, which I always thought was the most appealing thing about the game. And while The Sims 2 on the DS followed a storyline in a hotel which I don't really remember that much, The Sims 3 did a more faithful job in capturing the feel of a Sims game on the portable console. This, to me, feels like the best Sims game to take on the go, as you get to do a lot of the things that you will be normally able to do in the PC version of the game. From creating a sim from scratch and either building a house for them or just buying one with furniture already set, to socializing with neighbors, improving your abilities, getting a job, and exploring the city. This scaled-down version of the game manages to provide an immersive simulation experience that I feel is very decent for the size and capacity of the DS. I mean, it's obviously not perfect either, with the most jarring thing, in my opinion, being mandatory waiting whenever your sim is at work. And you have no choice but to leave the time-lapse on speed-up mode to make it end faster. But even then, it can take a good 5 to 10 minutes for your sim to be done with work, which I guess encapsulates pretty well the concept of a job in real life as well. Other than that, a core mechanic of the game is to take care of your sim in every way possible. You gotta make sure they're well rested, entertained, social, with good hygiene, and for them to eat well and go to the bathroom. It is also necessary for you to improve all kinds of abilities. These include cooking, fishing, charisma, fitness, etc. You can do this by performing the actions required to level up the ability. For example, cooking a meal, doing a TV workout, or even just practicing speech in your mirror. You can also read books in order to improve said abilities. Your sim has also specific traits that you need to choose and which affect some of the options they have in regards to how they behave and interact with objects and people, and a lifetime goal that you need to achieve by leveling up in a specific ability, or more than one ability in some cases, and working a job related to said lifetime goal. I would say this, Animal Crossing Wild World and Tomodachi Collection, which, for the unaware, is the Japanese-only DS prequel to Tomodachi Life, are the holy trinity of life simulation games on the DS, and games that scratch that itch pretty well for me. There are probably more than those titles, but I feel this one is a pretty charming and, again, spot-on version of the PC version. The pop-up masterpiece Plants vs Zombies made an appearance on the DS as well, being the first Plants vs Zombies game on a Nintendo console and developed by the same team. This version of the popular mobile title was released in 2011, 2 years after the original title, and it has the full main story campaign the original game had, with a couple new additions such as a versus mode, new minigames, and achievements. The main difference that people will notice between this and the original version is that the sprites and animations are downgraded from that version. And even then, the game gets really laggy if there's too much going on at the bottom screen, which is where the main game happens, essentially. This game is played entirely using the touchscreen, which makes sense considering that's also how you play the original version. And the idea of the game is pretty simple. You just drag plants into your lawn to fight off the zombies that will try to invade your house. As you go in the game, you unlock new plants. Each plant has its own characteristic ability to it. Some will attack, while others will defend. And there's even plants that you'll only be able to use in a specific environment. You can also play special stages such as the bowling coconut minigame, the Waka Zombie minigame, and even battle Dr. Zambos at the very end. Other features include being able to create your own zombie avatar and visit the Zen Garden where the plants will give you money in exchange for taking care of them, whether that is by watering them or spraying them with anti-bug spray. Overall, this game is a pretty faithful version of PvC, and I would totally recommend it if you don't mind the graphic and performance downgrades. Although, if you ask me, I'll totally take Plants vs. Zombies 2 over this at any time. That's my personal preference. But yeah, Plants vs. Zombies on the DS is still a pretty cool little experience that I'm glad has a version on this console. When you think of car racing games on the DS, your obvious thought will probably most likely be Mario Kart DS. And I wouldn't blame you. That game was a lot of people's reason to buy a DS. But coming very close to that one, there's another kart racing game which not only first came out on various other consoles, but made its way into the DS as well. And I'm talking about Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. As the title implies, this title is a crossover racing game between various Sega IPs, not only when it comes to characters but also tracks, with the predominant series here being Sonic, but also having characters from games such as Super Monkey Ball, House of the Dead, Billy Hatcher, etc. And an interesting tidbit of information I also managed to come across while researching this segment is that Banjo and Kazooie also appear in this game, although only in the Xbox 360 version and with their nuts and bolts appearances. So that's kind of disappointing. Anyway, the DS version of this game feels pretty smooth to control and look at, running at 60 FPS just like Mario Kart DS did, and bringing the same amount of content from the home console version, which not only include the various types of tracks present in it, but also the mission mode, which is reminiscent of the one included in Mario Kart DS, with a player having to collect a certain amount of stars in order to unlock more missions until you get to the final one at the very top. Even with the amount of downscaling when it comes to graphics, I feel this is a game that managed to get the feel and essence of the home console version right, which I feel can be a very difficult accomplishment. Everything from the tracks design to the HUD to even mechanics such as going All-Star mode feel really satisfying and need to have a glimpse at. And as unfortunate as this may sound, I feel this is the only Sonic game I actually enjoyed from the DS, as Rush didn't quite click with me and Chronicles, well, if you know what that game is, then you know why I never played it. Pac-Man World has a very polarizing reputation, from the first game being a classic PS1 platformer that I would say a lot of people remember fondly, to the other two games who I personally feel aren't as popular as the first one and are often overlooked. Both Pac-Man World and 2 were ported to the Game Boy Advance, with the first game being an isometric attempt at bringing the PS1 3D formula to a size-down capacity. A very bad one, mind you. And with the second one being a side-scrolling platformer that had nothing to do with how the console game played. Although I can't say much else about it as I haven't really played the sequel on the GBA, but a game that I for sure remember playing was Pac-Man World 3. And while this game did not have a GBA port, it did have a DS one, and surprisingly enough, it was a pretty faithful adaptation of the console version, although it was not a carbon copy of it, like the PSP version was. Because the space limitations the DS had compared to the PSP, it does have a couple differences. For starters, there is no voice acting in this game, with the cutscenes being replaced by still images and text. And your ghost partner, Orson, who was actually the villain in Pac-Man World 1, but now was willing to help Pac-Man, also seems to not be present in this game during the first couple levels. Whether or not he appears at all in this version of the game is something I don't know, as I haven't really been bothered to go far enough. But yeah, this game utilizes both normal controls and also the touchscreen as an extra mechanic to control Pac-Man, and also be able to do other things such as activate buttons and drag collected objects into a place they belong. Pac-Man himself controls very decently. The only complaint I really have is the fact that he can move a bit too fast sometimes, and that can be difficult when you have to do some careful platforming. For example, in a series of platforms where you need to keep jumping in order not to fall to your death. You get to do a lot of the stuff from the console version, obviously the platforming part, but also use special packdots to eat ghosts that come out of portals, activate different kinds of switches, and go through pretty much the exact same levels from the console version. While I haven't gone far in this game while recording the footage, I must say that this version of Pac-Man World 3 is a very faithful adaptation, and a way better game than whatever Pac-Man World 1 on the GBA was. Not that I was expecting it to be entirely the same as the console version, but it providing a better gaming experience even if it was somewhat different would have been enough to me. So, to close off this video, I wanna talk about a Crash Bandicoot game. Because, of course I'm gonna talk about a Crash Bandicoot game, come on. Crash of the Titans was a very strange trip from the franchise for a lot of people, with Crash getting a redesign that had fans scratching their head and thinking, why was there a need for them to make him taller and give him tattoos? My guess is that they wanted to appeal to a brand new audience that thought a radical and edgy look would please them more than a boring run-of-the-mill design. But obviously this put a lot of people off, and I will dare to say the same from redesigns from pretty much every other character during these games. But looks aside, both this and Might Number Mutant were a very interesting type of shift from the usual PS1 formula that briefly took the same type of risk to Insanity took when changing the formula a little, with Titans basically being a beat-em-up platformer where you collect mojo, whatever that's supposed to be, and also having a bunch of new mechanics that will replace spinning and sliding, which are included but not limited to punching, kicking, climbing, and using Aku Aku as a mind controller for the Titans, which are essentially the minions of this game. Crash of the Titans came out in various consoles, including PS1, Wii, PSP, GBA, and DS. And thankfully, I'm not here to talk about the GBA version. Trust me, I played that game a lot as a kid, and while back then I had no idea what was so wrong about it, nowadays, and after going back to it briefly in the past, I can safely say that that's a version of Titans I really don't wish to go back to. Ever. But the DS version of Titans is actually a pretty awesome version of the game that I feel not a lot of people talk about. This game keeps the beat-em-up formula of the console version, but with entirely new levels, and even a different take on the story, which also has full voice acting by the way.
Oh brother, not another tutorial! You'd better pay attention. If you absolutely need help with Crash's moves, pause the game. Now don't bother me again!
This game has a variety of islands and 2 levels per island, with each level having 2 variations, normal and bonus, with normal being just a linear platforming level with the beat-em-up aspect that made Titans unique, and the bonus one being a special type of level where you likely are going to have to use the stylus to control a Titan throughout the entire thing. This game has pretty tight and responsive controls, and you get to run freely through the levels, breaking boxes, collecting mojo, and a crystal per level, controlling titans and even going through the memorable bonus stages that are a 2D side-scrolling part, which is always a cute thing to see them bring back in games that are not a part of the main series. And while the platforming part is where you'll do most of the game, the touchscreen also plays its part, with you having to flick Aku Aku to a Titan to control them, as well as flicking to use an ability, and sometimes even blowing into the DS integrated microphone. But if you don't feel like using the touchscreen to use a Titan's ability, you can use a button instead, which is essentially what I did while recording the footage. Because trust me, having to use my mouse and my bootleg Xbox controller at the same time was not really a pleasant thing to do. Another interesting aspect of this game is that you also get to briefly control Nina to shoot a laser that turns cute animals into titans before she decides she doesn't want to be under her uncle Neocortex control and decides to rebel against him, just like in the console version. You get to also fight bosses such as Dingodile, Tiny, and obviously Neocortex, and explore different types of environments throughout the game. This version of the game blows the GBA one out of the water, and it's a version I really recommend if you want a cool Crash game on the go. I would even say it's better than the disappointment Mind Over Mutant was on the DS, which could have been another 3D beat-em-up platformer, but for some reason ended up being a 2D side-scrolling game, which... why? But yeah, good game, cool version, definitely give it a go if you can. Well, with that we made it to the end of this list. I need to say that even though the DS didn't have, in my opinion, a better library than the GBA did, I still enjoyed a lot of the games in it. Obviously, many of the popular ones are games that hold a special place in my heart, but the ones in this list, and many more underrated titles that I don't see a lot of people talking about, are games that I love going back to and playing every once in a while. And if you guys are cool with it, I could make a video on underrated DS games at some point, obviously without talking about the games already mentioned in this video. I feel like many of these titles deserve at least a little bit of love, so we'll see. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching everyone. Remember that if you enjoy the content that you see, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, as it helps me a lot and motivates me to continue doing this type of content for you. I do this independently, meaning I record most of the gameplay, write and record the script, and do the editing all by myself. So your support and feedback is greatly appreciated. And also a friendly reminder that I'm on Twitch, where I stream frequently, and I'm trying to get affiliates, so if you wanna drop for a bit and hang out, you're more than welcome to do so. Who knows, I might be live right now. But yeah, again, thank you so much for the support. I know this channel is very small, but I hope all of the hard work I'm doing right now pays off someday, and I hope that you guys can be a part of that. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!